Hi class. I just want to do a little video and just talk a little bit about the term assignment, which is due on June 11th. The assignment is actually called, just got an RAC assignment. What it actually stands for is not just random acronyms for any words. It's actually recognition, assessment, and control. Okay, so it's actually a real process in regards to occupational health and safety in regards to workplaces. Okay, like say an example would be an OHS committee or a manager could come in and do an assessment on a workplace to, first of all, back to the RAC, what it stands for. So the first thing is the recognition of the hazard or the risks in the workplace. Okay, so the R is just for the recognition of the hazards. The A stands for the assessment of the hazards. So the assessment could entail a risk analysis, a risk assessment. Okay, so the C in the RAC stands for controls. Okay, so what controls can we put in place to mitigate, reduce, eliminate the hazard that has been identified? So that's kind of what the assignment is. I've called it RAC, and that stands for the recognition, assessment, and control. Okay, so just a quick premise is, so you have to first of all identify a workplace. Okay, it generally has to be a real workplace. I mean, most of you would have worked at some point, and I mean there are risks in all jobs, so a lot of times it's easier to do something that you're familiar with. So it's generally, so we'll start off by talking a bit about the workplace. Okay, the tasks that the workplace involves. Okay, so I'll just use, I'll just use heavy equipment operator. Okay, so if it was a heavy equipment operator, this is the work environment, this is the equipment that's actually being used, and just talk a bit about the job. Okay, that's the introduction to it. Okay, so the main, and then you actually have, there's a part in the assignment called methodology, and you just have to say how you're going to gather the information. Okay, a good part of this can be, if you don't have access to this information, it can be somewhat fictional. I've given you a guideline right through of how to do all these steps. When I say fictional, it could be, because in a real life scenario, you would say, I've interviewed employees, I did a survey, I did a walk around, we did some sample work. So depending on the workplace and the job that you pick, you can, how would one go about gathering information, say on the job from the employees? I've also broke down in the instructions, like, okay, this only needs to be a couple paragraphs, like the methodology only needs to be a couple paragraphs. Okay. Yeah, so it's just introducing your topic, a methodology. And then there's the section called the findings. Okay, so your research findings is really the three main parts, and that's where most of the weight is. So the first part in your findings is going to be the R part of the RAC, and that's a recognition of hazards. So in the recognition of hazards, I'll use the words interchangeably: to recognize, to identify the hazards. Okay, so you're going to have to identify the hazards. There's different ways to approach it as well. You can pick one job, okay, and just say, I've kind of said in the assignment you need to identify at least 4 risks, right? You can identify 4 separate tasks within the job and maybe a risk associated with each. Or you can pick one specific job function, job task, and just different risks associated with it. Okay, so again, you need, it's laid out well for you in regards to instruction and how you need to organize it. Okay, so think of a workplace, think of the risks, and every job has risks. I'm sitting here, you can see in my little home office. My main risks here would be ergonomic. Okay, in regards to my chair, I have a thing behind my back. I have the footstool under my desk. I've got 2 monitors. My monitors are a certain height. So this is like my little workspace. So if it's a job, and maybe if you haven't had a whole lot of work experience, maybe you can talk to a family member or something like that. You can or can't identify the job in the organization. That's kind of, really up to you if you're comfortable doing it. I'm the only one actually going to be reading it. So that's the R, it's just assessing, okay? not assessing, recognizing the hazards in the job. And the hazards can be physical hazards, they can be biological hazards. Chapter 5, 6, I'm looking at my book here now, chapter 5, 6, 7, and 8. They could be psychological or physiological hazards. So, like before you kind of delve into it, kind of look at the book and look at how it expresses hazards and the language that's actually used. So the second part is the assessment of hazards. Okay, so the assessment of hazards. So first of all, sorry if I'm kind of back and forth, I've got notes here and as I think of something. So the first part in regards to the assessment, chapter 4 is the bulk of what you're going to need. So how to assess the risk and do an analysis of it, you're going to find that on page 89 in chapter 4. No, sorry, 89 is a risk assessment. You're going to find it all in chapter 4. So then it's actually assessing the hazard. So assessing is doing a risk analysis, a risk assessment laid out for you nicely in the book. You'll find that on, I think I have page 89, 95, just pages to direct you to for this. Chapter 4, Unit 5, you'll find the information on this. So assessing the hazards, you will also assess the hazards in regards to who's at risk. So if it's a big workplace, maybe it's only 1 or 2 people. Maybe it's people who have to do certain jobs. If it's a fish plant, you know, the risks are probably higher for the people who are doing the actual processing, working the lines, what have you. So in regards to the assessment generally requires some level of risk. There's a table presented in Unit 5 that, like, so this is a task. So is the risk of harm high, low, medium kind of thing? You'll see a table for that. Tables will work well here for a lot of this information. It's not necessarily a report where you're just going to see paragraphs and paragraphs of writing. Images work really well. So if it's a workplace that you're comfortable taking pictures of, then take pictures and insert it. So the reader of the report, in this case it's going to be me, but if this is a real function in an in a workplace, okay? Or if someone has an occupational health committee who would actually do these things, okay? So if I can see an image of the hazard, it's going to give the reader of the report a better idea. So the controls. So when we say controls are what can we put in place to control these risks. The control can be, I'm going to eliminate the risk, I'm going to reduce the risk, substitution. When we use the terms control, there's specific language used here. Don't just arbitrarily talk about it. Go to your textbook, find out how it talks about it. Some of the controls that chapter 4 talks about are elimination, substitution, engineering risks, admin controls, sorry. So engineering controls could be redesigning a piece of equipment, or ergonomics would probably fall under engineering controls. So make sure you're talking the talk. You know, you'll find all this stuff presented in the book, say nicely. Yeah, so it's generally like a process. Here's the job. This is how I'm going to gather the information. So now, only after that are we at the RAC. I'm going to assess the hazard. Then I'm going to identify the hazard. Sorry, that's the recognition part. Then I'm going to assess the hazard. It's also talked about in regards to the probability of it occurring, right? I kind of already said that, whether it's high risk, low risk, what have you. Some of the information, I kind of said this already, you might have to kind of make up, right? Like if you feel, because we're not necessarily going to be doing all of these tests, right? So you can say there's a 20% probability that this is going to occur every month, right? You know, try to be realistic with any of your estimations that you may make up based on the job. Okay, so then it just kind of finishes with a bit of conclusion or whatever. But think of it more as a report, more so than a paper. Okay, I am asking that you to provide a reference page. So there is the assumption that you are going to go out and look for a bit of research or information on it. And you should have minimum, you're going to be using your textbook. So make sure you reference that as well, because you're going to get a lot of information from there. But you may go out. There is some expectation that you will be doing some research on this. So back to the whole, like I said, a reference page. So I would like a reference page done in an APA style. You don't have to apply like the whole APA formatting throughout this type of report in regards to headings or what have you. I've got a list of how you want to organize it, as well as I like 1.5 or 2.0 spacing. There's some small formatting things I say to all students, no matter what you're doing. If you're using a table, do not split up the table into 2 or more pages in anything that you're doing. It just looks unprofessional. If at all possible, do not split up bulleted lists. Also, do not have a report of all bulleted lists. Okay, there is a use for bulleted lists, and make sure they're used properly, but it's like there has to be some substance to it. I don't like seeing just reports of just the whole report, paper, whatever, is just a bulleted list. There's a rubric provided. Okay, so the rubric is there in the module for this assignment. Look at the rubric before you start. I say this to all students, because when I'm doing something, I provide a rubric. The rubric will tell you where the weight is. Okay, and in this particular assignment, the weight is in what I said, the RAC part under findings. Okay, the weight will be there in regards to, so that's where the bulk of the weight is. The talk about the job or whatever, 3 or 4 paragraphs, the mythology, 3 or 4 paragraphs, the final conclusion sort of thing, 2 or 3, 4 paragraphs. The paper from start to finish should be about 8 to 10 pages. So each section, like the RAC, should be 2 or 3 pages. Now that could include tables or what have you. Yeah, it's probably what I would call more so like the practical hands-on type of assignment, more so than a research paper type of assignment, because the bulk of what you need is presented in this course, right? But you may want to find additional information. I mean, you Google any of these terms I'm talking about, like risk analysis, risk assessment, you're going to find nice little tables and information to present, how to present this information. Okay, the assignment is worth 20% of the course. You've got just about 2 weeks to finish it. And like I said, when you identify your workplace and the hazards, kind of like I said, look ahead. Well, I shouldn't say look ahead, because we are in the 4th week of the semester, so you should be well over halfway through. In regards to what type of hazards and risks are in a workplace. And again, to talk the talk, okay, using the proper terms instead of just kind of like winging it and just talking about your, job, whatever. Anyway, if you have any questions, or if you get started, or even if you have an idea, okay, this is a business, this is a direction I'm going with it, just run it by me and see. Okay, so again, I mean, if you list a pile of hazards, in regards to the controls, you really need to only discuss probably one of the hazards in regards to controls. Okay, in real life, if you had any hazards, you would come up with controls for all of them. Okay, but for the purpose of this, from the controls section, you can just identify, the controls, what you would put in place. Okay, so again, recognition, identifying the risk, the assessing the level of risk, high risk, low risk, medium risk, the probability of it actually occurring, who would be harmed by that particular risk, and then what controls can be put in place by the employer to reduce, to mitigate, to eliminate the risks. Okay, so it's a report, it's a process that you kind of identify something and follow through. Okay, probably repeating myself there now, but yeah, get started and just reach out to me if you have any questions on your particular topic. And it's due on June the 11th, and I will just finish, which one I've already said in emails. Make sure you're doing the other course work. A lot of students are not doing discussion posts. Important to get those done. 10% of the course value. Yeah, so there is another term test this upcoming weekend, June 4th and 5th. Very similar to the other one in regards to organization, okay? And format and the types of questions. And then the final exam schedule, I suspect, will be out in the next week or two. Okay, so reach out if you have any questions. Thanks.